Can you hear me, sir?
Hi. Good afternoon.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Perfect. So we'll go about this once at 4 o'clock. We can let everyone in, and then I
Okay.
can do a small introduction, and then you can
Okay.
start ahead with your webinar. And in the end, I would end with a small closing note, and then we can be done with it. What do you say?
Sure. So when we start, I can start with the introduction, right? Or you want to
You can.
introduce and then I should come in?
Anyways works. You can introduce. That is not an issue. Just that
Okay, fine.
I think the principal and our HOD, both of them are going to be there. We're
Okay.
sending so most probably AK Singh sir and Kate sir will be there. So
Okay.
just waiting on their confirmation, but most probably they'll be here.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'll start off with a small introduction.
Okay. So I'm also, what I'm doing is I'm making you the host.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. So because the thing is that if you see the people behind TWG are very passionate about teas and are tea experts. They travel every year to all these 46 different tea producing countries from where we pick up our teas, and we take our teas only from certain select tea estates. And like I said, it's only orthodox tea that we take, and they are selected especially by these experts. They all come to our main unit in Singapore, where we do the blending, the packaging, everything else happens, and then again distributed all over the world, including India. So what I'll do now is I'll share my screen so that I can go to the presentation, and I can also tell you what exactly I'm going to cover in.
Sir, give me a moment. Sir, give me a moment. Mr. Rajat, please mute your mic. Mr. Rajat.
All right, I'm requesting everyone, so please put yourself on.
Mr. Rajat Chaudhary, can you please mute your mic?
All right, I hope the screen is visible. I've already shared the screen. Can you all see the first slide?
We do. We can, sir.
You can. Okay, great. So to start with, like I said, now TWG started in the year 2008. So this year that you see on the, a lot of time people get confused with, they think that 1837 is the logo, so the company might have started in the 1837, but that's not the case. 1837 plays a very, very significant role actually in the history of Singapore, because 1837 was the year when Singapore was officially declared as a port for the import and export of teas and other Epicurean products. So that 1837, this particular year has a very, very, can say, very significant, so very important year, at least for the tea industry in Singapore, and that's how we value this year a lot, and hence we also always start with 1837 TWGT, which basically means the year in which the tea import and export in Singapore started. But yes, TWG's journey actually started in the year 2008. So TWG, this word TWG stands for the Wellbeing Group, which was actually started by two people. So our main founder, his name is Mr. Taha Bagdeep. So Taha was actually can say born and brought up in Morocco, and Morocco has a very beautiful Moroccan tea culture, which is basically the mint tea culture that we have, and that's how tea was always there in his blood. And when he was growing up, he started traveling for his studies, and then later on for his work for job. And he actually developed an habit of, you can say, an interest of collecting teas. Like people collect stamps, people collect coins. Same way he started collecting teas. So whenever he used to go to any tea producing country, he used to always get some specialty tea from that country. So that's how his tea collection started growing, and he also started learning more about teas coming in from different parts of the world. And finally, in the year 2008, along with his wife, he decided to establish his own company, which is actually called the Wellbeing Group, and they decided to settle and start this company in Singapore. So that's how the journey started. And like I said, from that time till date, if you see, we have more than almost around 1,000 different varieties.
Good afternoon, Manas Patel.
Which includes single estates, which includes blended teas. We also have some exclusive and classic blends like English breakfast, tea. So all these are actually part of our portfolio. And talking about the teas that we get, so like I said, we take our teas from all the 46 tea producing countries. So in this map, you can see here all the producing countries of the world, which also include major countries. I mean, obviously our major suppliers like China, Brazil, Australia, South Africa, and of course India. So TWG also has some beautiful tea from Indian tea states, from Darjeeling, from Assam, and also from certain states in south of India. So our journey, like I said, started in the HoReCa segment. I mean, with hotel industry, we got connected. Can say this was the first hotel from where we started our journey, the distribution basically network. So TWG, if you see, we have a large distribution network. We distribute our teas, or we sell our teas to almost 42 different countries, which mostly includes the HoReCa hotels, restaurants, catering. And our journey of this particular tea distribution started with the hotel called as Ritz-Carlton in Paris in France, which is also known as one of the finest luxury 5-star hotels, and also considered to be an epitome of hospitality. And that's how then we started obviously our journey and started distributing our teas to all over the world. And apart from teas, we also have a very beautiful collection of tea accessories. We also do some tea infused, can say, delicacies like tea patisserie. We also have that. In fact, we recently also introduced our online store called as www.thewellnessstore.in. I'll share the link later on the chat box. You can go through it. It's a beautiful site. In fact, it's in the FAQ section. You get a lot of things to learn. I mean, a lot of basic information on teas, and plus you can also explore different types of teas and the tea accessories that we have got on the website. So as of now, we distribute our sales channel basically includes direct distribution to hotels, and then we also have an online portal, like I said, the Wellness Store, and we also sell some of our variants, very selective variants, through e-commerce sites like Amazon, Tata Click Luxury. So these are the different platforms. We also have a boutique store, which is as of now only in Delhi. We have two stores. One is at the Oberoi Delhi, Oberoi Hotel, and the second one is at the Delhi Airport, International Airport at Terminal 3. So that was all about TWG, what we do and what are the different kinds of teas that we deal in. As we go along this presentation, I'll tell you more about the different types of teas that we have in our portfolio. So now this picture that you see here on your screens, this actually, if you see this looks very colorful. All the different types of teas of different colors. There is a red tea, there is a blue color tea, there is a green tea, there's a white tea. So we are going to talk about all these teas one by one, obviously in today's session, because we, like I said, the around 1,000 teas that we have in our portfolio also includes some very rare varieties of tea. So we are going to talk about obviously teas, and we're also going to talk about the herbal teas, tisanes, what are they and how they are different from actual teas. All right. So, but before we start, I hope all of you have a cup of tea with you. If not, you can quickly go and grab it, because this is the right time. I think it's already almost 4:15 in the evening, so we can all have a nice cup of tea, because it's always good to talk about tea when you also sipping on some nice teas, right?
Daddy, band karo.
So let's talk about what tea is all about.
Mute your mics.
Fine tea. So all the teas, they come from one single plant, and the botanical or the scientific name of the plant is Camellia sinensis. So that's the plant, or that's the genus we call it, from where all the teas come from. Now, Camellia sinensis actually has 3 different varieties. So the most common one, you can say the Camellia sinensis is the main variety, which is the Chinese variety, which is called. And then there is something called as Camellia sinensis assamica, which is native to Assam, which is the Assamese variety, which comes from Assam in India. And there is one more which is not that popular all over the world. It's called Camellia sinensis Cambodia. Now, Cambodian variety is again not that popular by itself, but it's mostly used in a lot of blends. Basically, it goes in tea blends. So these are basically all these varieties. They all come from the main genus. These are basically different species, you can say, of the Camellia sinensis family. And the history of tea, if you see, goes back to 5,000 years ago. So it's one of the oldest beverage known to mankind, say after water, and also the largest or the biggest drunk beverage around the world after water. So 5,000 years ago, which means the history goes to almost about 2007 when it was discovered by chance in China. And I also tell you the interesting story behind how this tea in China. But before that, we will also talk a little bit about the thein or caffeine. Now, we all know that tea and coffee, they have caffeine, right? But the caffeine which is found in tea is not called actually caffeine. The correct term is thein. So thein is also a form of caffeine, but it's different in the terms of the molecular structure. Caffeine is something which is a stimulant. Thein is also a stimulant. There is nothing wrong in calling it caffeine, but then why we mostly stress on thein, because thein has very different effects on our body compared to caffeine. So caffeine, like I said, is a stimulant, obviously, so it gives you an instant kick when you have a cup of coffee. Thein also works the same way. The only difference is it has a slow effect on the body. I mean, like caffeine, obviously, it will not give you an instant kick, but it will take some time, and it's more of a relaxing, soothing effect on the body, which thein has. So that's how thein is a little different because of the molecular structure. It's just that caffeine gets absorbed or in our bloodstream very quickly. The molecular structure of these two, can say, stimulants are a little different. What happened with thein is the molecules are very closely binded to each other. They are actually binded to other substances found in the tea leaves. So when we consume a cup of tea, it takes our body a little time to break down these molecules of the structure, and then it takes obviously it also takes time for our bloodstream to absorb thein, which means it takes a little time. And whereas caffeine, is the molecules are much closely bounded to each other, which means they get very easily and very quickly absorbed in our body. So that's the main difference. And apart from thein, tea also contains another amino acid called theanine. A lot of time people get confused between thein and theanine. Theanine is a very different substance or a compound which is found. It is a kind of amino acid, which is also known to give a relaxing and a soothing and a healing effect to our body, which is actually not found in coffee. That is something you can say advantage which tea has over coffee, because it has got both thein as well as theanine. And then yes, there are 6 different varieties. So 6 main different varieties of teas which come from the Camellia sinensis plant. So we'll talk about all these varieties. What are these different teas and what is the difference? So if you see, all the teas, like I said, come from this particular plant, the Camellia sinensis. But then the only difference is the way it is processed. So the processing makes a lot of difference. Like, for example, whether you call it white tea, green tea, black tea. So it's the process which makes these teas different, though they are coming from the same plant or the same family. So let's talk about the history of tea. Like I said, the history of tea it's quite interesting. So tea was, like I said, was discovered in China in the 2732 BC. And the founder of the tea, this person, his name was Emperor Shen Nong. So Shen Nong, in fact, there are a lot of different stories. If you go through Google, if you go through book, you'll find a lot of different stories around tea, how it was discovered. Some stories they sound a little realistic, but some of them are like more fictional kind of stories. So this is one of the stories which have been accepted by a lot of historians, and you'll find this one by most of the authors or the tea experts. That's the one which most of the people believe in, that this was discovered by chance by this person called as Shen Nong. So Shen Nong was the emperor of China, and he was also a herbalist by profession. Herbalist means he used to make his own herbs, but using botanicals, different medicines, basically. So in those days, if you see people in China, obviously in 2700 BC, they used to survive, or they used to thrive more on the natural medicines, like say with herbs made from botanicals. They used to drink a lot of hot water, warm water to keep themselves immune from diseases. So that's how. So in fact, this person also, Shen Nong. So one day he was just going around in the forest in search of some herbs and some botanicals. And after a long walk, he got a little tired, and he thought, and he obviously, like I said, he always used to carry some hot water or say warm water along with them. So he thought of having a sip of hot water. So he sat under a tree to relax for some time. And when While he was about to drink hot water from his cup, what happened was some tea leaves from the tree where he was sitting, from that tree, blown by. So suddenly he had a very heavy wind. So blown by the wind, a few leaves from the tree fell into his cup of hot water, and these leaves, they were dried leaves. So when they fell into his cup of hot water, he saw that the color of the water started changing. So he decided to take a sip. And the moment he sipped it, he found this particular beverage very, very soothing, very relaxing. As soon as he gobbled it down, when it went inside, he felt like it is having soothing, very relaxing, and a very calming effect on his body. Something like it was like checking and investigating his entire body. And immediately the name called Cha came up from his mouth. So Cha is actually, you can say, the first name which was given to this beverage. And Cha is actually, in Chinese, it means something which investigates, to check or to investigate. That's how he got his first name, was Cha, and then later on, obviously, it became Chai when the tea started traveling through different European countries to other southeastern countries, and by the time it reached Europe, it obviously became tea. This tea actually again came from a word called as tea, because the Dutch people who used to import most of these teas from China and distribute it across Europe, they used to pronounce it tea, which was T double E. So tea or tea, you can call it, and then later on, by the time it reached Europe, I mean, especially British or England, they again changed the spelling. They said that tea is not a correct pronunciation, correct spelling. So they started writing it as tea. So it became tea finally. And India got the name chai actually through, can say, the Persian word, or can say the Arabic or the Urdu word was basically chai, which they don't never used to call cha, they used to call it chai, and that's how we had in India, it was introduced as chai. So that's how tea got its different name. But yes, if you see the history, it was discovered in China 5,000 years. Until the 3rd century AD, if you see, tea was mainly used as a medicinal beverage. But later on, obviously, after the 3rd century AD, they started drinking it on a regular basis. It became like an everyday drink. In fact, in 3rd century AD, it was also declared as a national drink of China. And they started, obviously, the Chinese started advising or encouraging the local people to drink it because of its health benefits. It's something which also builds up immunity. So for all these reasons, it actually became a regular beverage, day-to-day beverage. And if we also talk about how tea now traveled, so there's another story which also says that it was not actually discovered by Shennong, but it was discovered by Buddhist monk Bodhidharma. So, but that story sounds a little more fictional, because Bodhidharma, a lot of these Buddhist monks, if you see in those days, they used to travel to different countries, they used to meditate. So Bodhidharma, he traveled all the way from India to China, and he went into like a 9-year-long meditation. And while meditating, he actually felt asleep. I mean, but then to avoid sleeping, he obviously didn't want to sleep, because meditation was something which was very, very important. So he could not afford to sleep. So what he did was he closed his eyes for a few seconds just because of sleep, and immediately he took a knife and he cut off his eyelids. So the place where his eyelids fell on the ground, immediately a tea plant or a tea sapling sprouted from the earth, and that's how tea was discovered or founded. So that was also one story which you might come across. So though this story does not sound to be very realistic, but yes, there is one thing which is very much sure. I mean, most of the historians, they believe in that Buddhist monks played a very, very important role in basically spreading
Excuse
the.
me, sir.
Yes.
I just need one moment, guys. Please put your mic on mute. There's a lot of disturbance in the Mr. Purvesh, and apart from him, no one right now. But there was this Rajat Chaudhary who hadn't muted. Okay, so now we are fine. So if you
Okay.
can make me the host, then I can guide the meeting accordingly. So I won't have to bother you again and again.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've made you the host, Manas.
Yes, sir. I got it.
Okay.
We can proceed, sir.
Right. So maybe you might have to again make me the host again, because I might have to change screen in between again when I'm showing some pictures or videos, or you can allow me to share the screen, however it works.
For sure. Okay.
Okay. All right. So obviously, yeah, coming back to, we're talking about Buddhist monks, how they actually help in spreading the tea culture. So like I said, now these monks, they used to travel a lot from different countries, and obviously to stay awake during meditation, and also to refresh their mind and body. They always used to, I mean, when they obviously came to know that China has got something called tea, they always use, whenever they used to come, say, pass through China, or say from start their journey from China, they always used to carry some stock of tea with them. In fact, the credit of discovering the black teas also goes to the monks, because if you see till around the 11th century, all these teas which were made in China were mostly all white teas and green teas. Black teas came into picture much later. I mean, because the Chinese people, they were not aware about that there is something called as black teas which can also be made, which is actually an oxidized form of tea. So, but then there's these monks, they actually came across these oxidized teas because when they used to travel or they go on long journeys, the tea used to come, say, in contact with sometimes a very harsh weather, could be rainfall, because obviously at that point of time they didn't have say airtight containers or something to carry these teas. I mean, the storage facilities were not that good. So teas, when they used to come in contact with, say, air, oxygen, or sometimes rain or moisture, they start to oxidize automatically, which is basically a natural process. And the tea starts to turn black in color from, say, green in color or green tea. And these monks, when they saw that the color is changing, they got very interested to understand how this tea, which is not got oxidized or say turned black in color, will taste or probably say smell like. So they started brewing those black teas, and to their surprise, they found that the black teas were even more, I mean, or say they had even higher stimulating effect. I mean, they were even more effective in keeping them awake for a longer period of time, and they were much more refreshing, because usually if you see black teas, they are high in thein content. Thein, or what I also said in the beginning, is basically a form of caffeine. So that's how these monks, they started spreading the tea culture. And whichever countries they go to, they always used to tell people about the health benefits. And that's how black teas, like I said, also came into picture, because it was just discovered by them by chance when they used to travel with the tea stocks. And then talking about the other countries, how the tea culture spread. So especially if you see Europe, like I said, Europe, the tea reached only in the 12th century, when the Dutch people, I mean, the people from Holland, they started trading, because they were already trading with China since the 6th century, but they were trading on different other products like spices and all. But when they came to know about tea, and there's a beverage which China is using, and it's very, because China used to also use tea in a lot of medicines, especially for medicines like stomachache, for arthritis, all these diseases. Also, they used to use the tea infusions or the tea extracts. And thinking that this is a good source of medicine, the Dutch started exporting it. But then later, they realized that this could also be proper beverage on a day-to-day basis. So then they used to import, and then they also started re-exporting to other countries like France, Germany, England, Portugal. And very soon tea became a really popular beverage, especially with the upper class, the high society, the royal families of these countries, especially English people, the English royal families, they just used to love these black teas. They were obviously not used to such beverages. And if you see, in fact, this English breakfast tea, which is very popular, I'm sure you must have all heard about English breakfast tea. So this came into picture only because the Queen of England, she used to love having a cup of strong black tea in the morning with her breakfast. In fact, very soon, tea also became a part of the morning breakfast menu, or say it became like a proper course of the breakfast menu. And English breakfast tea, if you see most of the English breakfast teas which are available in the market, including the one that we make, they are blends of 3 black teas. First one is obviously Assam, which is the major blend, because Assam is known to be one of the strongest black teas. Second is a Ceylon black tea, which is Sri Lankan. And then there is third one is a Kenyan black tea. So most of the time, English breakfast teas would be made by blending either all the 3, or sometimes it could be just the Indian, the Assam, and the Kenyan black teas. And the English people, or the British people, they just love drinking black teas for breakfast in the morning. They always prefer to have a good cup of breakfast teas. So that's how this thing became really the tea culture started spreading, and became popular. And it reached Europe also, and from England, obviously, a lot of other people started. So like I said, in the beginning, it was only the upper class people who were supposed to drink teas, because it was an expensive commodity, especially because like I said, the Dutch people, they used to import it and then again re-export it. So there were a lot of taxes, a lot of duties which were imposed on tea. But then later on, when tea became really popular, especially in England, English people started trading directly with China without involving the Dutch. And that's how tea became a much more affordable community, and even the common man can afford it. So if you see till the mid of the 18th century, there was a very good trade which was going on between English England and the Chinese. And it was more of a barter deal because China used to take a lot of opium from England, from English people. Opium is basically a drug, which was that time Chinese people used to use in medicines and all. But slowly and steadily, what happened? A lot of youngsters in China started getting addicted to opium, realizing that this is a drug. And so when China saw that the young generation is getting spoiled because of opium, they completely stopped the trade. So the England started, say, taking any opium from England, and on the other hand, they also stopped giving teas to England. But this, by that time, it was. I mean, one good thing which happened was the tea plantations in Assam were already ready by the 1835, because we were already under the British rule, and there was a person or a Britisher who had already realized that tea is something which can also be grown in India. Because this person, his name is Robert Bruce. He's also known as the pioneer of tea in India, because he was in the British Army. He was an intelligence officer. He was posted in Assam for on a mission for some time, and that is where he found these tea plants or tea saplings growing wild. And then, but then that time nobody in India knew that these are actually from the Camellia sinensis family. But he picked up these some seeds and some saplings. He sent them all the way to place called the Calcutta Botanical Garden, where this particular thing was actually checked, and they started. Manas, can you make me the host again for some time, please? Manas, are you there?
I've made you the host, sir.
Okay, thank you. So that's how obviously tea. Now we talk about tea culture in India. So like I said, obviously it was brought by the Britishers, because they first time found these tea plant or the tea going wild in China. Sorry, in Assam, and then how they started they discovered it, and they started encouraging the local farmers to actually harvest it, or say to grow it, because once Calcutta Botanical Garden confirmed that yes, this is the same tea which comes from the Camellia sinensis family. The only thing is they were not sure if it belongs to the same family which was grown in China. So then they, what this guy, I mean, Robert Bruce, who he disguised himself as a merchant, as a tea merchant, as a traveler. He took all these tea saplings, the tea seeds, all the way along with him to China, because Chinese people were very smart. They were not ready to disclose all these things to other countries, because they were making some good money by exporting teas to different countries. And then finally, he got these tea saplings tested in China also, and Chinese people said that this belongs to the Camellia family, but it's not the sinensis variety, but it's an Assamica variety, which obviously a local variety from Assam that belongs to Assam, because the leaf size was a little different, was a slightly bigger leaf, and also the brew. I mean, the infusion was when you brew an Assam tea, if you see compared to a Chinese tea, would be very different in terms of flavor and characters. So it's the same family but different species. Same like you have in mango, we have. So there is one family called mango, but you have different mangoes. There is Alfonso from Maharashtra, there is Kesar from Gujarat, or maybe the Sherry from North. So there are a lot of different varieties. Same way in teas, like I said, it's the main variety, and then there are 3 different species. So so that's how Assam got its first, or you can say its original species, called the Assamica variety. And then a lot of Britishers, they started encouraging the local farmers in Assam to grow teas, because they ultimately wanted to send teas back to London, because China was not giving them any tea, and these people were already addicted or habitual to teas, the English people. And then that's how a lot of commercial plantations came up in Assam. And in 1839, the first consignment, or you can say the first chest of made tea, was sent to China, to England, and where it was sold in an auction. In fact, the English people liked the Assam black teas much better than the Chinese black variety, because of its strength, the body, the character, the flavor. And soon Assam became one of the very popular black teas in England. So that's how tea was introduced. But again, like I said, the Britishers, they obviously used to brew their teas. They always used to infuse their teas, which means basically they used to always add some hot water to tea leaves. They used to brew it, and sometimes they also used to add some milk or sugar, if only if required. But in India, like I said, I mean, most other things, they get their own twist, because we Indians are expert in giving everything our own twist. We call it the Indian twist. And soon the teas, the brewed teas, became the masala chais or the cutting chais, because if you see currently, or say in last many years, the kind of teas that we make at home is basically the cooked teas, the boiled teas, which is not the right way of what the Britishers taught to us, because the tea is always supposed to be infused or brewed with hot water and not basically boiled. But that's how we like our teas. So we put everything together in a pan, say sugar, milk, water, some spices also sometimes if you're making a masala chai, and then we boil everything together. So, and again, if you see as the diversity of the country, the tea drinking culture is also very diverse in India. I mean, if you talk about Kashmir, where is the kawa, the pink tea, gulabi chai is very famous. If you talk about Maharashtra, especially Bombay, cutting chai is popular. You go to Rajasthan, there is something called as the Nagori chai, which is very famous by the Nagori community. And then if you go to south, especially Hyderabad and all these places, the Irani chai is something which comes from there. So yes, there are a lot of different can say there's a lot of variations in teas, how we make or how we drink our teas in India. But yes, one good thing is that the brewing tea culture is again coming back slowly and steadily to India. A lot of people again, because of health reasons, maybe they are again switching back to green teas, wherein obviously they cannot cook it or boil it with milk and sugar, but then obviously they have to brew it and drink it. So because of people are getting health conscious, so it's good that now the whole leaf, the orthodox leaves, are being again brewed again. So yes, it's still a mixed market, but still, if you see, India is still called as a black tea drinking market because we are the largest consumer of black teas in the world. Compared to, I mean, we drink more black teas compared to any other country in the world. And in fact, when it comes to production of teas, we are the second after China. So we are the second largest producer of tea. Consumption-wise, it's Turkey. Turkey consumes the most amount of tea. In terms of black teas, like I said, yes, India is number one. And also in terms of production of black teas, also we are number one because we produce most of the black teas that we produce in India is basically the black teas. So usually, if you see, we produce more of the CTC style of black tea. So CTC is basically the teas that we get at home, the small granules, the danedar chai that we call it. So danedar chai is basically called CTC because it undergoes a process called cutting, tearing, and curling. So CTC, the name comes from cut, tear, and curl. So we'll talk about the cut, tear, and curl process also, how they do this cutting and tearing and curling. So, but yes, these teas are more popular because they are easy to brew and they give you a very much more stronger brew because that's a form of black tea. But however, while I was talking about TWG, we deal only in the orthodox leaf, which is basically the whole leaves. So there's no cutting, tearing, and curling process involved there. So that's the kind of teas that we deal in. So that's a completely different segment altogether. But yes, good. Like I said, it's good that a lot of people now switching to whole leaf teas or black teas because of health reasons. The orthodox teas from the CTC chai, which was up till now obviously was the main variety or the dominating the Indian market. So that was all about the history of tea. And now coming to obviously the types of teas, how do we classify these teas into different varieties? So now, like I said, all the teas, the 6 main types of teas, they all come from the same family, which is the Camellia sinensis family. So Camellia sinensis, and then you have green teas, yellow teas, something called as blue teas, oolong teas, and there is black tea, mature tea, and also white tea. So we'll talk about these teas one by one, but before we go on to each and every variety and talk about also the manufacturing process, something which is also very important to know is the tea flushes. Now, tea flushes is something like you have vintage in wines. I mean, some of you, those of you must have already covered wine as part of your syllabus. I'm sure you must have studied about vintage, the vintage year which is there on the wine bottle. So vintage year basically means the year in which you harvest the leaves, harvest the grapes or pluck the grapes to make the wine. But usually in wines, the vintage can happen only once in a year. I mean, the plucking or the harvesting usually happens only once in a year. But in teas, the same thing, they don't call it vintage, but they call it flush. So flush basically means the time when they harvest the leaves. But flushes could be multiple times. It could be one time in a year, it could be 2 times in a year. Sometimes certain teas might have 3 or 4 flushes also, like Darjeeling has 4 flushes. Assam has around 3 flushes. If you go to south of India, like places like Nilgiris, Munnar, where they grow teas, they will not have any flush because they harvest their teas or pluck their leaves all around the year. So that again depends. But yes, most teas will have a flush, which means a harvesting season or a plucking season. Now, again, if you see when these leaves are plucked, obviously to make teas, they pluck it only at a certain time of the year. So most of the time, the first flush starts in the beginning of the year, which could be somewhere between March or Feb to April. That's the first flush, the spring flush. Now, spring flush is supposed to be a very soft floral aromatic kind of tea, which will give you. Especially the Darjeeling First Flush teas are known for this. So somebody who's looking for a nice floral light bodied tea with a nice aroma probably can always go for a Darjeeling First Flush. Now, why? Because uh, this is just the starting of the year, and so the leaves which come are very fresh, young, and crisp, with very light and floral characters. So usually the flavors of the characters become strong when the sun shines. Obviously, when there is a lot of heat, high temperatures. So a lot of these compounds which are found naturally in the tea leaves, such as polyphenols, catechins, they start converting with the effect of the sunlight into other compounds like theanine, or no, sorry, not theanine and thene, but yes, there are compounds which are flavonols and flavonoids. So flavonols and flavonoids actually give a lot of taste and color and say aroma to the teas or the tea, or when you brew them. For example, black teas have very high content of flavonols, which means they will give you a much more stronger brew, a very strong brew. And obviously the tea might also be quite bitter because of high tannin content. So tannin is obviously something which is found in the skin of the grapes as well as in the tea leaves naturally. So all these things decide the flavor and character of the tea, which means there is something called as terroir, which plays a very, very important role. Terroir means the climatic condition, the geographical location, the place where you grow your teas, the rainfall. Same like in grapes. We say that a particular grape variety, when it grows in France, the same grape if you grow in India, there'll be a lot of difference in the taste, flavor profile, or the aroma profile, because of the terroir of the two countries is very different. The climatic condition, the soil, the water is very different. So same actually holds true for tea also. Like for example, if you compare Darjeeling tea with an Assam tea, you'll see Darjeeling teas most of the time are much more light-bodied, lighter, softer when you taste them, and also a little floral. Whereas if you talk about Assam, they are like a medium to heavy-bodied teas with much more stronger flavor characters to them. So that is something which actually comes because of the climatic conditions. Because Darjeeling, if you see, has a much cooler climate. The soil they have is basically a mix of kind of loamy soil with a mix of sand, which means it does not retain a lot of water. And most of the tea estates that you will see in Darjeeling, they are all on the hill slopes, which basically means somewhere between 2,000 feet to 7,000 feet these tea plantations or these tea estates are, which means they receive not very heavy rainfall, but alternate spells of rainfall. Again, not very bright sunlight, but again, it's like an alternate sunlight. So the climate is very moderate and very beautiful for certain soft teas. In fact, if you see the varieties also which grow in these two places are very different. For example, Assam grows the local variety, which is Camellia sinensis assamica, whereas in Darjeeling, when these plantations, so like I said, in when teas started growing in Assam, it was the year I think 1835, but Darjeeling plantations came up only around 1841, 1842, almost 7-8 years later. And when they planted the Assamica variety in Darjeeling, it was not successful because Assamica variety needs a different climatic condition, which only Assam can probably give. But then when they planted the Chinese variety, it was much more successful. So in Darjeeling, if you see most of the tea plantations, they use or they grow the Chinese variety, which is the original Camellia sinensis variety, because China and Darjeeling climate conditions are very, very similar. So that is something again which a tea estate owner or probably a tea grower will have to take care of, which variety is growing and what are the climatic conditions that he is going to use, say in terms of soil, water, temperature. So these things also play a very, very important role, and they also decide the final flavor and character of the teas. And same way, the flush, like I said, also matters, because the first flush, like I said, when the teas are harvested, they are like early beginning of the year, and the beginning of the year is basically means just after the winter season, which is somewhere between November to say till January. So with these 3 months, usually there is no plucking or no harvesting, because the winters in these places like say Darjeeling, Assam, or even other places which have cold climate, they will not pluck the leaves because there will be a lot of dew, a lot of frost on the leaves, which means moisture. And moisture is something which is not considered good for leaves. Even in the rainy season, when there is heavy rainfall, usually in the months, if you see between July to August, there won't be any harvest. So July, August, these 2 months, most of these places will receive heavy rainfall. So during rainfall or rainy season, again, there'll be a lot of water on the leaves, moisture on the leaves, which means the leaves will not be very good for making teas. Except for certain places in certain states in Darjeeling, they also have fourth flush, which is basically they call it the monsoon flush, wherein they pluck the leaves just before the heavy rains start in Darjeeling. Otherwise, Assam, if you see, they usually don't do any the fourth flush, which is the monsoon flushes. So starting from the first flush is the spring, also known as spring flush, which is Feb to April, like I was saying. Then just before the rains start, there is a summer flush, which starts say end of April or first week of May and goes on till the second week of June. And summer flush will obviously give you much more heavy-bodied, full-bodied teas with a little sweet, sometimes a lot of strong fruity characters. And Darjeeling second flush is known to be really, really popular because of this thing. Because like I said, usually during the April and May, the leaves, they see a lot of sunshine. And because of the sunshine, obviously, there is a development of flavonoids and flavonols. These compounds, they are at their peak in the tea leaves. And when you pluck these leaves, obviously, you'll get a much more stronger cup of tea. And then there is an autumn flush also, which is after the rain season. So once, like I said again, and this period where they don't pluck the leaves, say the winter seasons or say the rainy season, that period is called the dormancy period, wherein the leaves are allowed, the plant is allowed to rest, and they are not going to do any pluckings. And so after the dormancy period, again in the autumn, just before the winter starts, between September, October, there's a third flush, they call it. The third flush is not very popular. I mean, if you go to a specialty tea store or a tea boutique, you'll not usually find the third flush as tea, but it'll be the first and the second flush that are much more popular, and you'll find them. And a lot of people usually go for, like I say, a Darjeeling first flush or a Assam second flush, depending on what kind of teas they like. But third flush is usually used for blending because they give a nice color. They create dark infusions with a nice nutty kind of taste. So that's the reason why they are not very popular by themselves, but then they mostly are added to different other blends. Teas like Nilgiris and all are blended with the third flushes because Nilgiri has a very light color to it, but the third flush will obviously give it a little darker color to those kind of leaves. Talking about South of India, they usually don't obviously believe in flushes because, like I said, the kind of climate which South of India has, not very heavy rainfall, not very heavy winters, or not very strong summers. A very moderate kind of climate they have all around the year, and hence they do the pluckings or harvesting, say, almost all around the year. So hence they cannot use the term flush for their leaves. So yes, just remember that flush is something similar to the vintage in wines. Is the time of the year when you pluck the leaves to make your teas. And obviously, when you taste different teas, you'll also understand the difference, how a first flush can taste different from a second flush or say a third flush. So now we come back to the different types of teas, the different varieties of teas which we were talking about earlier. So we'll cover these tea varieties, these tea types one by one, starting with the first type or the first variety, which is the white teas. Now, white teas are not very popular in India. Darjeeling does produce some white teas, but they are again very, you can say, a rare kind of tea, not produced in very large quantities like other teas. But yes, most of the time you can say, but these are the least processed, which means they consist of only the buds and the tender leaves. I'll show you a pluck diagram also, which will explain what exactly are buds. So buds, I mean basically the unopened leaves, very young leaves, or the new leaves which are just sprouted and not even opened. So those leaves they pluck to make usually the white teas, and another variety called as yellow teas, which I will also be talking about. And hence, which also makes these teas quite rare, because if you see searching for these unopened buds or unopened leaves and then plucking them takes a lot of time. It's a tedious job, and also it's something which cannot happen obviously all throughout the year, but only on during a particular time of the year or a particular season. Hence, these things, I mean, and obviously it involves a lot of manpower, time. It's a tedious job to do, which actually means that these teas will be much more premium and probably will demand a high price. So let me show you a little diagram of the pluck just to explain how a pluck would look like, or say a white tea, the buds would look like. So this is the pluck diagram. So you can see this particular thing. This is actually an unopened bud. So that is called the unopened bud. And usually for white teas, they pluck the unopened bud, or you can say the unopened leaf. And obviously the next leaf, which is just next to it, the youngest leaf, or the youngest, which might have just recently opened. So only these two leaves are sometimes plucked. Some very premium white teas like the Yinzen or the white needles, they will use only the bud. But some average price, which are not very premium teas, probably might also use the smaller leaf, the younger leaf. And according to this, they also classify them into different pluckings. So there could be an imperial pluck, which is something, the new bud and the unopened bud, and the new bud. And then there is something called as the fine pluck, which is basically the new bud and the two leaves next to it. So fine plucks are usually used mostly for the green teas. Whereas talking about, there's another pluck called as the coarse pluck. Now, coarse pluck is usually used for all the black teas, which is when you go further below and you pluck the bigger leaves. That is basically called the coarse pluck. So yes, this is how they usually decide what pluck, and it's up to obviously the job of these ladies, the females who go and pluck the leaves in the tea estates, because they have to be really careful about that part. And in fact, that's the reason why if you see most of the time it's the job of the ladies, because they say that they have much more softer fingers and they can easily pluck these leaves in a much better way compared to males. If they go for plucking, probably they might not be able to pluck those delicate leaves with such a ease like how the females or the ladies do it. That's about white teas. So, and again, white tea, if you see the processing part, it's very simple. The white teas are the least processed. So usually all the teas, they undergo a manufacturing process, which means that the first stage involves is the plucking or the harvesting. So when the leaves, they are plucked, they come to the estates. So tea, after coming to the tea estate or tea factory, the first process they undergo is called withering. Withering basically means that's the drying process wherein the leaves are allowed. Usually this happens in the natural sunlight, where they allow the leaves to dry in the presence of natural sunlight, or sometimes the places where there's not enough sunlight, they might just blow in some hot air through blowers through the leaves to reduce moisture content to say about 30%, because when the leaves come fresh from the tea estates, they are very crisp, they have a lot of moisture, a lot of water. And the next stage is rolling. So what happens if you are not withering it, not reducing the moisture? In the rolling stage, a lot of leaves might break, which means you're not getting the smaller the grade, the lower the quality of tea you will get.
Mr. Dillon, can you please mute your mic? Mr. Dillon?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So, and yes, white teas is something which are obviously not done for the drunk for the character and the body or the flavor, because these teas will give you a very light brew, not very obviously strong in colors, light pale yellowish kind of brews. But then the kind of infusion is not. I mean, they are not drunk for obviously for body and character, but they are mostly for health reasons, because they are full of antioxidants. And obviously, same like can say green teas, because green teas are also known to have antioxidants. These antioxidants are something which builds our immunity system, or which also protects us of certain diseases like cancer or heart diseases, high blood pressure. They play a very important role when it comes to the health benefits are concerned. So in fact, for skin also, antioxidants are something which are very good. So a lot of people obviously who will buy white teas or will drink white teas will be more for the health reasons. And obviously the best time to drink white teas is afternoon or evening. They are very good for consumption. In fact, late evenings or late night consumption also, white tea is something which is recommended, because a lot of people sometimes they feel like drinking teas after the meal or post the meal, just before going to bed, which is actually not a good thing to do, especially with black teas or green teas, because they have, like I said, certain amount of caffeine or thein content, which might disrupt your sleep, because like I said, they are stimulants. Thein is a stimulant which might just activate your brain cells, which means you might not get a good sleep in the night. But yes, white teas, since they are the least processed, they hardly undergo any processing. So like I said, these unopened leaves, the buds are plucked, they just go the sun drying process, and then they're slightly baked just to kill the enzymes which are there to avoid undergoing the oxidation, and then they are packaged. So these are the stages which probably a tea leaf will undergo. For example, if you are making a proper black tea, so black tea will first go withering, which is drying, then rolling, and then oxidation, which is basically when the leaves break, the compounds or the elements which are there, like these polyphenols or catechins, they are automatically exposed to oxygen in the air. And when they are exposed to oxygen, they automatically converting into other compounds with a natural biological process, like say flavonols and flavonoids, which give flavor, character, and color to the leaves. So that's, and then obviously once the oxidation is done, there will be one more drying stage wherein they reduce the moisture content further, and that will be either through pan frying, through could be a steaming process, because that is where the leaves are exposed to high temperatures, because they will bring down the moisture content to almost about 3 to 3.5% only before packaging the leaves, because that is something which is very important. If they're not doing it, if there is a little more moisture left in the leaves, then obviously the leaf will not have a very long shelf life. It might develop some bacterial or fungal infections, and which will spoil the leaf. Coming on to the next category after white tea is green teas. Green tea is obviously something which is very, very popular. In fact, the most popular teas in the current scenario because of the immunity properties of the immune, how they build their immune system. So that's how white teas, if you say the green teas, are becoming or getting popular day by day. Also talking about how these green teas are produced now. Green teas, again, if you see, are in the natural form. They do not undergo oxidation, so they are called unoxidized leaves. So the leaves are plucked. They are again withered, same like the white teas. They're allowed to dry to reduce some moisture, and then they roll the leaves. But after rolling in green teas, they immediately either do a pan frying process or a steaming method, which depends on which country the green tea is coming from. So China and Japan are the two main countries who follow this green tea process. So first is obviously the Japanese method, which steams the leaf to make green teas, and the other one is the Chinese method. So these two methods are usually applied to make the green teas. And what happens in Chinese method and what happens in Japanese method. So Japanese method, after the leaves are rolled immediately, because when the leaves will be rolled, obviously the leaves will be broken, which means the cell walls are exposed to oxygen, and that is where the leaves start getting to oxidize. So coming to the Japanese method, steam leaves, what they do is basically they pass the leaf, or they pass the steam through the leaves. Now steaming, basically what it does is high temperature steam. When you pass it through the leaves, it will automatically deactivate certain enzymes which are present in the leaves and allow it to undergo this oxidation process. And once the steaming is done, they again do a final drying process is done, and then the leaves are packaged. And then in Chinese method, Chinese people, they don't use the steaming process, they use the pan frying process. In fact, that's the reason why if you see these two pictures on the slide here, now these two are actually examples of Japanese green teas, because they are much more brighter in color. Because what happens when you boil or steam something, for example, you boil a carrot, what happens? The carrot will look much more brighter in color. Same way, these leaves, after going through the steaming process, the color becomes much more brighter, and they will have a little herbaceous kind of notes, boiled vegetable kind of notes to these kind of teas. I mean, talking about the flavor profiles. Whereas the Chinese method, they do a pan frying, which is basically a dry pan frying. So they have big pans, and there is a fire below, which means the pans are quite hot. And the leaves, they put the withered leaves in the pan, and then just they keep rolling it, or say basically turning it so that the heat is evenly distributed, and the leaves are dried by this pan frying process. Wherein again, the leaves, because since obviously the temperature is much more higher in a pan, the leaf might turn also slightly blackish in color. So it will be like a mix of black and green, something like this, the Chinese green varieties, if you see. And they will also have a little toasty or a little roasted kind of notes to it because of this particular process. And green teas, again, like I said, usually drunk for health reasons. But yeah, some people are just like drinking green teas on a regular basis, not necessarily only for health, but if you are a green tea lover. Because in green tea, again, there are a lot of different styles of green teas available. There are single state green teas. There are exclusive blended green teas, which are probably could be blended with some exotic flowers, fruits, or could be some herbs, basically to add on to the benefits. So again, green teas are rich, or say an antioxidant, and they have also high immune building properties, immunity building, because green teas, these catechins which are found naturally in green teas, are actually also help our body to fight certain bacterial and viral infections. And that's the reason why, if you see in today's scenario, because of COVID-19, a lot of people also including green tea as part of the diet, because everyone wants to stay immune. So apart from the regular exercise or healthy food that you are eating, green tea is something which can also be considered as a immune building food. So green tea has obviously got a lot of health benefit, but also depends how you drink your green tea. Like I said, green tea should not be obviously boiled, but it should be brewed. We'll talk about the proper brewing temperatures also, what temperature you should brew your teas. And again, if you are drinking it for obviously weight loss reasons, or you want for slimming reasons, then obviously you should not avoid adding any sugar to it. The best thing is to add a little honey or probably a little jaggery syrup, which are much more healthier options for drinking a green tea. Coming on the most popular style, which is the black tea. Now, black teas, like I said, are the most popular teas around the world, including India. In fact, most of the teas that we produce in India are all black teas. So black teas contain highest level of thein because they undergo a full oxidation process, which means the leaves are completely oxidized. And then these tea obviously can be drunk in the morning because of their invigorating character or their stimulating effect because they have high amount of thein content. And black teas are also, like I said, graded based on the manufacturing process. So they could be whole leaf or the orthodox leaves. There is something called as broken fanning. Most of the tea companies, commercial tea companies, that the leaves that they put in the tea bag is basically called fannings. And the finest or the fourth grade is called the dust, which is very, very small, minute particle, just like the Danedar chai or the CTC that we use at home, even smaller than those. It's very minute particles of tea is called the dust tea. A lot of times they are very popular in South India. A lot of tea stalls or local chai walas, they use this dust tea in South of India to make tea because they give you a very strong brew with a very small quantity. So if you see the grain size is actually inversely proportional to the brew. Sometimes a lot of people who switch from CTC tea to whole leaf sometimes think that why am I not getting a very strong brew, which I used to get in my CTC chai. Obviously, you will not get because using a whole leaf tea, and CTC, which is a cutting, tearing, curling process, will obviously give you a much stronger brew, even with a very small quantity because of the flavonol and the thein content in it. So that is something which obviously a lot of people need to understand, because sometimes people they don't switch to whole orthodox leaves only thinking that it will not give me a very strong kind of brew which I'm looking at. But yes, it depends also on the brewing time and the temperature, how long you brew it and how long you steep it basically. So graded on base, like I said, on the base of leaf and quality. And most of the time it is available in these two types, whole leaf and the broken leaves, the black teas. Now black teas, again, like I said, undergo the same process, first withering, then rolling. And then after rolling, they are allowed to oxidize, which means that the black teas are actually kept in a place or a room wherein there is a lot of supply of air, which means basically a room with ceiling and with a lot of windows and doors wherein the natural air can come in, because obviously the natural air will have a lot of oxygen. And these leaves, when they are break, obviously the cell walls are broken, and these compounds which are present, they naturally start to oxidize in the presence of air, the oxygen, and they start converting. In fact, I'll also play a video which will show you how the color starts turning. So usually when you see an oxidation process for black teas can take somewhere between 24 to 48 hours, and the leaves will start turning color from green to slightly yellowish, and then from yellow to say brown, amber, and then black. So that's how this oxidation process happens. And the fourth style of tea, which is also a very interesting style of tea, is called the blue tea. Now, blue teas are also known as oolong teas. Again, something which, apart from green teas, are slowly getting popular. Still not very popular in India, but yes, oolong teas are very popular in China and country like Taiwan. And these are two countries who also produce the highest amount of oolong teas. Oolong tea can be called basically an agreement between a green tea and a black tea. So what happened when, for example, somebody who's a black tea drinker, who wants a good strong cup of tea with a lot of flavors and characters, wants to switch to a green tea. It's not easy because green tea obviously will not give you kind of flavor and character you're looking for. So then oolong tea could be an option wherein you can go from black to oolong first and then probably to green tea, because oolong is something which is semi-oxidized, which means it will have the flavors and characters of a black tea. I'm not saying complete flavors, but yeah, some amount of, or I say considerable amount of flavors and characters of a black tea. And also equal amount of health benefits of a green tea, because this is something which is between a green tea and a black tea, not completely oxidized. So in most of these oolong teas, again, there are two different methods because these are two countries, China, and Formosa is basically the older name for Taiwan. So Formosa basically means a beautiful island. So in Taiwan, in olden days, used to be called as Formosa. So Formosa method in Taiwan, mostly they use 60 to 70% oxidation, which means almost up to the level of black tea. So if you see these two pictures here, they are basically Taiwan-made oolong teas. They will look, when you see these leaves, for example, if you're not very familiar with oolong and the black tea, probably you might think that they are black tea, but actually they are not black, they are oolong teas. Which means the oxidation will happen up to a certain time period, and then they will purposely stop the oxidation by heating the tea leaves. Could be by steaming or could be by baking or the pan frying process, but they will heat the leaves at a certain stage to stop the the oxidation in between. And then that's how you get a semi-oxidized kind of leaf, which will have certain characters left from the black teas, the green teas also. Whereas in China method, if you see, the oolongs will have more of a green tea character because of only 12 to 15% oxidation that they grow through. Hence, if you see, they will look something like greenish, or sometimes they also look bluish in color after going through the 12 to 15% oxidation. That's the reason why they're also known as blue teas. And oolong is basically, again, a Chinese word, which means black dragon. Because in China, when they roll these leaves, they look something like these round balls. You can see here in this particular picture where my cursor is. So that is how they started calling it oolong teas, because the teas look something like a black dragon. So the name called oolong. But yes, a lot of people also call them blue teas because the semi-oxidation process. A lot of teas, especially the Chinese varieties, they look slightly bluish in color. It's like a mix of bluish and greenish kind of color once they go a little amount of oxidation. So hence, again, oolong teas are, like I said, supposed to have a lot of good health benefits because of the green tea characters of which they retain because of the semi-oxidation process. And the fifth type is the mature teas. Now, mature teas not very popular in India. In fact, not even popular among the in the world. But they are also known by another word called as pu'er teas. Now, pu'er is basically a place, a town in China from these teas, where these teas come from, or were actually discovered the first time. So they are called mature teas. Now, mature teas are actually could be compared to just like how you have matured whiskeys, which mature in the barrel, or could be certain wines which mature for a certain number of years in a barrel or certain months. Same way, these mature teas, hence they are called matured, which means they undergo an aging process, not in the barrels, but then they actually usually made of containers or baskets made of bamboo, or sometimes could be made of cane. And what they do is, it has got a very interesting process. So in mature teas, first of all, they use only the bigger leaves, and they use these. In fact, in China, if you see, there are some trees which are almost 500 to 600 years old trees which are still standing tall. And in fact, tea is something, if you remember the history which I told you, that this person Shen Nong who discovered tea was sitting under a tree. So I forgot to obviously mention this, but tea is actually not a plant or a bush or a shrub. It's actually a tree. I mean, if you're allowed to grow it wild, it can grow up to a height of almost about 18 to 20 feet, like a proper tree. But in most tea states, I mean, whatever you must have seen if you have visited any tea gardens, or even if you sometimes see in the television, the plucking that they do is basically for the ease of plucking. They maintain the height to about, say, 3 to 3.5 feet, which means they do the pruning. The cutting happens after every 1.5 years to maintain that height for the ease of plucking. Otherwise, if they will not do this pruning or this cutting, it can obviously grow to a height of about 16, 17 feet. And in China, there's the Yunnan province where they have certain old trees which are 600, 700-year old. And most of the time for the mature teas, they use these leaves from these old trees, which are the bigger leaf from the bottom of the tree or the bottom of the plant. They pluck it, much bigger leaf with a lot of flavorful characters, because these leaves obviously are, when the leaf is old, it must have seen a lot of climatic condition, a lot of sunlight, which obviously makes them much more flavorful and characterful. So in mature teas, what they do is they first, again, the same process, withering. And after withering, they roll it. After rolling, there is slight oxidation which happens. You can like say, same like what happens in the Chinese oolong tea. They just oxidize to slight about 10 to 12% little oxidation. And after oxidation, what they do is they do a steaming process wherein steam is applied to kill the enzymes so that they're not getting oxidized any further. But then they also undergo another process called as fermentation, which is basically a natural fermentation. So basically it's oxidized and fermented both. So when obviously steam is applied, the leaves are very warm, they are hot, and they don't dry the leaves. So after steaming, they immediately, what they do is they put the leaves, so they compress these leaves tightly in a basket, which I said could be made of a bamboo or could be a cane basket. They stuff them tightly, and then they keep them aside in a room or a place which is rich in natural microorganisms. So it could be natural bacteria, natural kind of fungus or something, which naturally start fermenting the teas because of the moisture and the heat which the teas already have. And they also maintain a certain humidity level in those rooms for the teas to undergo a natural fermentation process. And then this fermentation can continue for several months, or probably could sometimes several years also. And after, say, the maturation complete, sometimes you see these teas, they also take the shape of those baskets or these container where they're kept in. So this picture that you see here on the screen is actually the picture of a loose leaf maturity, but then these teas can also come in the form of cakes, which are like round shapes. So let me see if I have a picture here. I'll share with you this, how pure tea cake probably would look like. So this is the picture of a tea cake. This is also a mature tea or a pu'er tea. It's just that this is a different form of tea altogether. So like I said, when you put it when the leaves are wet and hot, and when they compress them tightly, press it tightly in these round baskets, and when they remove it after, say, a few months or few years, automatically after drying, they take the shape of the basket, which is like a round cake. And the best, but then, yeah, they are easy to break. You can always break a small piece if they are brittle. You can put it in hot water and can brew it. But yes, the brewing time for the mature teas, the tea cakes, a little longer. It might take at least 7 to 8 minutes to brew the tea properly. So that was about the maturities. Coming to the last type or the last variety, which is yellow teas. Now yellow teas are again, like I said in the beginning, same like white teas, but in only difference in white teas they can use both. I mean the unopened leaves and also the youngest leaf or the opened leaf. But then in yellow teas they use only the unopened buds or the unopened leaves, which again makes it very very rare and very very premium. And in yellow teas, the only difference from white teas is after sun drying, they do a slight fermentation wherein they steam the leaves, they apply steam, same like the mature teas, which means when the leaves are little slightly wet and warm, they do an autoclave process wherein basically they wrap the leaves into a certain kind of cloth or a fabric, and then they keep these leaves when they are still hot and warm into a certain humidity condition or humidity level, wherein the leaves start to ferment, and they just ferment them slightly only for certain few hours. They allow the leaves to ferment, and then after fermenting, obviously they get a slightly yellowish color, because it's also known as a kill green process, wherein the leaves start to lose the chlorophyll, which gives green color to the teas. And that's how they get this little yellowish kind of appearance to the. In fact, let me see if I have a picture of the yellow tea. I'll just show you how they look like. So this is a good example of a yellow tea. You can see this picture here. So you can see these. So these new buds, if you see, most of them they will also have these hairs on the sides, because when the leaf is, I mean, when the new buds, the unopened buds, you can see these hairs. In fact, the white teas will also have something like this. The reason why we call them silver needles or yenzeng, which means basically because of these hairs. Because in white teas, these hairs look whitish, white in color, whereas in yellow teas, due to slight fermentation, they look slightly yellowish in color. Again, yellow teas have got a lot of health benefits, but again, like I said, they are very, very rare, very premium, quite expensive type of teas. Not, I mean, obviously many people drink yellow teas, but white teas are obviously more popular compared to white teas compared to yellow teas when it comes for drinking for health reasons are concerned. So we have covered all the 6 type of teas which come from the Camellia sinensis family. So before we go on to the red tea, which is actually also known as the tisanes or the herbal teas, what I'll do is I'll play a small video for you, which is actually on the Darjeeling, and then we'll also see the video on the tea manufacturing process. So let me play this video on. So this video actually talks about the different flushes of Darjeeling teas. So let's see this video. Let me change my screen and then I'll play this video for you.
This is on the slope of the majestic Himalaya. We have 4 seasons in Darjeeling. The spring is in March, April, when the snow starts melting in the mountains, and that's when we have the magical first flush. The monsoon is when we get a lot of rainfall. The trees are smooth, mellow during the monsoon flush. The autumnal flush is when the plants are slowing down. The growth is very, very slow, and you get these absolute fragment teas. So we have these 4 flushes which the entire harvest period is divided into. We get the cool Himalayan breeze. We get a lot of sunshine. We get a lot of good rain also here. We got the Himalayan streams which nurture the estates. It's a combination of all these factors which are very, very unique and very special to Darjeeling. It's a clear distinction of something very special, very exotic, cannot be replicated anywhere.
So if you, I mean, I'm sure you must have all heard about, like, now Darjeeling teas are obviously known to be the most exclusive teas in the world. In fact, Darjeeling is also known as the champagne of the teas. So champagne is the sparkling wine from the Champagne region of France. Same way, Darjeeling is known to be the champagne of teas only because of its quality, its characters, and which is very rare. I mean, not many countries. In fact, Darjeeling also got its GI status, which is known as a geographical indicator, in the year 2003. And it's the only product from India, or the first product from India, you can say, which got this status. So now GI status is something which only certain products, like for example, champagne has. So the sparkling wines coming only from the Champagne region of France can be called champagne. Or say tequila has, because the spirits from Mexico, certain part of Mexico, can only be called as tequila. Same way, Darjeeling has this GI status, which means if you, somebody who wants to produce or make a Darjeeling tea, it has to be completely, say, grown, harvested, processed, plugged in Darjeeling, the place called Darjeeling. Only then you can call it or write on the packaging of Darjeeling. In fact, if you pick up a packet or a bottle of Darjeeling tea, you'll always see there is kind of this GI status or this logo is there on these bottles or this packaging. So now coming to the last category, which is basically not a tea, but it's basically we call it a herbal tea or a herbal infusion. So these teas are also quite popular, and they are called herbal teas or also sometimes known as tisanes. Now, why tisanes? Because tisane is actually a term which was used in France in olden days to make a medicine or a herbal drink out of barley water. And tisanes, actually, whenever you see this term tisane, it means it will not contain any camellia sciences, which means there is no leaf coming in from the tea family. It will be just, could be a chamomile flowers, or could be just any herb, could be a lemongrass tea or something. But yes, there are sometimes herbal teas also people get confused with it. So herbal tea is something which is basically could be a blend of say green tea or a blue tea or a white tea with a particular herb. So like for example, green tea blended with jasmine flowers, say herbal tea, or say green tea blended with lemongrass again is a herbal tea. So that's the reason why I wanted to clarify this. So whenever you come across a herbal tea, do read it on the packaging what it contains. Does it actually contain tea leaves, the Camellia sinensis leaves, or is just probably a dried form of a fruit, flower, could be a herb. So we have a very popular, a very interesting tea called as the rooibos tea, which is basically a bush from South Africa. And we use the leaf of this particular bush to make this tea called the red tea also, because the leaf is red in color and has very nice sweetish aroma and a taste to it. And this tea is completely free of caffeine or say theine, because it does not come from the Camellia family. It's come from a different bush altogether, which is basically the rooibos. And it's good for children and pregnant women also, because usually for children and pregnant women, rooibos is something which we don't, caffeine is something which is not supposed to be taken by them because of health reasons. But yes, rooibos is, and it is good. In fact, it's a good source of salts, minerals. It also works as a good electrolyte, because a lot of times when you exercise, when you do a workout, you need a nice something good to drink, which basically hydrates your body. Or even during a summer season when you have to keep your body hydrated, rooibos is something which actually can work wonders, because it has got some nice content of minerals, salts like sodium, and in fact can also make some nice red teas or iced teas out of this particular tea. And then obviously we make a lot of different other styles. So we have one more tea called as chamomile tea, which is just a dried chamomile flower, which is again basically a caffeine free tea. It's also comes in the same tisane category. And coming on to the exclusive blends, which I was talking about. So now tea is something nowadays you can experiment a lot. So like our company in TWG, every time or every year we come up with new blends using different natural ingredients. Because a lot of the consumer taste is also changing. Like I said, in India, if you see the diversity of tea drinking culture is very widespread. I mean, it's very it's very diverse. Just like the diversity of the land itself, the diversity of tea drinking is the culture also is very, very different. So we, to match everyone's palate or taste profile, we also blend teas with a lot of different exotic fruits like blackberries, red berries. We also use citrus fruits to blend our teas, especially the Earl Grey teas. We've got 11 different blends of Earl Greys. Then jasmine is something which is very popular. A lot of people like jasmine blended with green tea. So we do nice blends of jasmine. And then rose teas. So we have also got a tea which is blended with rose petals. Same way, spices. So masala chai is something obviously which is very popular in India. So we have got a masala chai variant. It is called Comptoir de Andes. And then there is chocolate. So we make an Earl Grey tea, which is basically blended with chocolate. It's called the chocolate Earl Grey. And then Moroccan mint obviously is very, very popular tea. So it's a green tea which is blended with some mint from Morocco. And teas with again dry fruits like almonds. And we also, in fact, the gold tea, which I was talking about, the yellow tea. So this tea, we also, the yellow buds, we also use some gold. It's basically 24 karat gold, which is basically used to blend with the tea. So it's like the tea leaves or these buds are actually plated or coated with gold. So yes, so these are, I mean, obviously the different blends which could be created apart from the classic blend. So classic blends could be like an Earl Grey, it could be an English breakfast. But when it comes to exclusive blends, I mean, every company will have its own different blends, and this is something which a lot of consumers, in fact, for cocktails and mocktails also, these blends work really, really well. Talking about the packaging, and we will also obviously going to talk about how to brew a perfect cup of tea. So if you see, I mean, in TWG we use tea bags, so which is cotton tea bag, and we have a silken tea bag as well. And then we also have loose teas. Now loose tea is something which is the same which goes in the loose teas, and the whole leaf, the same leaf goes in the tea bags also. So the grade is same which we use across all our packaging. So it's the whole leaf that we use for tea bags as well as loose teas. Tea bags, we use the cotton tea bags, which are, because cotton is much more, can say, sustainable. It also, being a fabric, it also gives the natural flavor and character, because of it allows basically a lot of space it gives to the teas for the leaves, the whole leaves to expand or to breathe when they are being infused. And then we also got a silken tea bag option, in apart from the cotton ones. Talking about tea and food pairing. Now, tea and food pairing is something, again, which is a very interesting topic. Same like you have tea and wine pairing. So in tea and food pairing also, we talk about two different aspects. One is called contrast pairing. Second is called match pairing. Contrast pairing means when you pair tea with a totally opposite kind of flavor of the food. We call it the contrast flavor of the food. So that is something, again, which is very popular in tea and food pairing. Secondly, there's something called as match pairing, which means matching a tea with a food which has got similar kind of flavor profile. So I'll just give you an example what is contrast pairing. For example, now black tea. Black tea, as we said, because of the complete oxidation, they could be very strong in terms of flavor and characters. But certain black teas are in fact also quite bitter because of the high tannin content. So tannin is, like I said, is a compound which is found in grapes also, which makes your red wines slightly bitter. Same way, these tannins are also found in the tea leaves, and especially in black teas, they are much more, can say, prominent and make the black teas quite bitter in taste sometimes. When you make a quite strong brew, it could be quite bitter. But then, being in bitter, they actually go well with a lot of desserts, especially cakes, chocolates. The black teas can be paired with, because the bitter and the sweet flavor profile, they are basically examples of contrast pairing, which means to cut the bitterness, you need something sweet to eat along with it, that particular tea. So obviously you can always pair it with a sweet food. Same way, black tea can also work well with certain highly flavored foods like your red meats, or even Indian preparations. The black teas go really well, because when in India we use a lot of spices in our food, which makes them really flavorsome, really flavorful food. So obviously, if you pair, say, a flavorful dish with a green tea or a white tea, the food is going to dominate the tea, which means you're not going to enjoy the tea, because those teas are much more delicate and softer in terms of flavor and character. But whereas if we talk about the black teas, because of their strong flavor and character, they can equally pair well with the food as well. I mean, the strong flavored food. So these are example. However, this chart is something which also explains how different teas can be paired with different style of food. But then I would say that this is just a reference chart. It's not necessary that you always have to stick to this chart, but it's more about when it comes to tea and food pairing, same like it's wine and food pairing, it's more about personal perception. I mean, whenever you get an opportunity to taste tea or pair a tea with the food, try it and see what is going well with what. So it's always about experimenting and seeing what goes for your own palate, and then probably, obviously, you can, if it goes well for you, you can always recommend it to your guests or to your customers as well. So as per this chart, I mean, we'll just quickly go through this. It says that, I mean, obviously white teas is something which are very delicate, so they go really well with salads. White teas also go well with chocolates. And then when it comes to yellow teas are something which can be paired with truffles, with mushrooms. Again, shellfish or seafoods, yellow teas go well with. Even the green teas, there's something which go well with white meats, fishes, seafoods. Blue tea is something which pairs well with eggs, cheese, and again, white meat, especially chicken. Blue teas or the oolong teas, they go really well. Black teas, I already said, could be paired with highly flavored foods, red meats. Mature teas, the pu'er teas, again, can be paired with desserts, with chocolates, again, eggs and cheese, is something which goes well with. And red teas, again, being slightly sweetish in terms of flavor and the taste profile, I mean, the aroma and the taste. Red teas can be paired well with chocolates, with cakes, pastries, even with fruits, you can pair red teas. So that's how the pairing goes. I mean, we can, like I said, do try and see what goes well with what particular tea whenever you come across a different type of tea and different food. So same how like we do wine tasting, what we do is we take a wine and then we take different type of food item, like something salty, something citrusy, something little astringent, or something little spicy, and then we pair it with the wine and see the spicy is going well, or the sweet flavor is going well, or the salty is going well. Same way in teas also, you can try these different flavors and see which tea is pairing well with which particular flavor, or say our taste profile. So that is something which is very important. So this picture, if you see, is actually from one of the tea estates in Darjeeling. So like I say, most of the Darjeeling tea estates would be on a very high slopes, somewhere between 2,000 to 7,000 feet. And the plucking is not an easy job. and sometimes it could be quite difficult, especially during the monsoon season where it could be very slippery. But yes, these ladies, they are actually, can say, for so many years they've been plucking, and these bamboo basket, they pluck the leaves and they put it. So it's actually a skilled job, if you see, because when it comes to plucking for yellow teas or your, say, white teas, it's not that easy. So what I'll do is, before we so I have covered most of the things. Manas, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I would first like to get on with the questions. There are a few questions in the chat box.
Okay.
So starting off with Shaurya, he asked as to how does CTC affect the profile of the tea?
Okay, so CTC, sure. In fact, that's the reason why I wanted to play this video, the tea manufacturing video. But anyways, I'll play it later. So there is a process called the CTC process, which is cutting, tearing, and curling process, which the CTC teas will undergo. So obviously, when the leaves is cut, tear, and curled, they will undergo this, and then obviously after that they undergo the oxidation process. So which means the oxidation, when the leaves is cut, tear, and curled, all the enzymes which are there in the tea leaves, they are exposed to oxygen, and obviously turning them into much higher content of flavonol and flavonoids, and giving them much more flavor and character. So which means when you use a small amount of the CTC teas to brew your tea, you will get a much stronger brew or a cup of tea, compared to if you use the whole leaf teas of, say, the same type or a black type of whole leaf, which will not give you probably that kind of strong character or flavor. So that also depends, in fact, on the brewing time. So usually for brewing a cup of tea, we recommend that if you're brewing it properly, say in a pot of in a teapot or say in a cup, then use about 2.5 grams. So in our tea bags also, in fact, we use only 2.5 grams, and the proportion is 2.5 grams is to about 150 to 180 ml of water, which means ideally your pot or cup wherever you're brewing should have, if you're using 2.5 gram or a tea bag, it should have around 180 ml water maximum. And then the temperature should be slightly below the boiling point, about 90 to 95 degrees Celsius. Ideally for brewing, we do not boil water, because the moment you boil the water and you pour it on the leaves, the whole leaves or the orthodox leaves, they are sometimes just destroyed or probably killed because of very hot water. And water also loses its own flavor and character when it is at the boiling point. So there's a difference, obviously, how you brew or you make your CTC teas. CTC teas, these things doesn't matter a lot, because ultimately you're going to boil them with water and sugar and all, milk and all those things. But yes, for whole leaves teas, which are very delicate, this is something which is very important. So water temperature, I'm not saying that you have to use a thermometer to measure it, but make sure that your water that you use is not coming to a boiling point. Probably you can just take off the heat or say from the kettle just before it reaches 100 degrees. Or even if the water has been boiled, allow it to rest for some time before you pour in the pot. And also it is important, when you're brewing in a pot, allow the pot to heat for some time. So pour some hot water in the pot, just rinse it and throw it away. So that once your pot is hot, it is warm, then you put the tea leaves in it, so that the leaves will also get to little breathe in that warm atmosphere inside the pot. And then after 1 or 2 minutes, pour the warm water or say hot water around 90-95 degrees Celsius, which will allow the leaf to brew. And again, the brewing time, ideally for most of our teas, we recommend somewhere between 90 to 95 degrees Celsius, except for certain rare teas like your white teas and yellow teas, where we can bring it down slightly further to about 75 to 80 degrees Celsius. Otherwise, for most black and green teas can be brewed at around 90 to 95 degrees Celsius for about 3 to 4
Right. I believe that answers the question, Shaurya. Going ahead with Tanmay's question, he's asking why the leaves are plucked by hand only.
Right. So now again, this is a good question, because it's not necessary that every tea estate will use pluck by hand, but yes, certain tea estates nowadays, most of the commercial tea estate might also apply a machine plucking. But again, in machine plucking, you are not sure what kind of leaf you are plucking, because machine is obviously not going to pluck, say, only the top one or the top two leaves as per the pluck diagram which I showed you. So when it comes to imperial plucking or the coarse plucking, for example, if you're doing making a particular type of tea, especially white teas or yellow teas, or even for the matter green teas, you have to use a proper hand plucking, because only then you can be assured about your quality of tea, because the machine can pluck the tea from anywhere the part of the plant. So you don't have any control on the quality. So most of the commercial tea plantations, especially those who make CTC teas and all, wherein ultimately they're going to cut, tear and curl, they are not bothered that much about the leaf size. But yes, all these exclusive handcrafted teas and all, they will always use proper hand plucking to maintain the quality.
He's asking furthermore that can scissors be used? Like, are scissors a better option rather than hand plucking?
Scissors could be a better option, but yes, again, it's not that feasible, because you cannot give scissor to each and every say harvester or plucker who goes into that. And plus what I have seen in most of the tea estates is the speed with these ladies pluck with their hand, probably they will not be very comfortable using scissors. It might take a little more time. So
Right.
plucking with hands is much more easier option. And plus scissor, you will have to use both your hands. Like for example, first you will have to use your left hand to hold the leaf or the bud, and then again from the right hand you have to cut it, which is basically more tedious and time taking. Whereas when they do the hand plucking, they just use their 2 or 3 fingers to pluck the leaf, and they are like expert in that, doing that because they have been doing for so many years. So I guess
Right.
plucking with hand saves time and labor both. So
I believe that answers the question, Tanmay. Yeah. Going ahead with Shilpa. Shilpa's asked, apart from the color that is white, green, yellow, are
right.
there any other classifications for tea?
So no, see, it's not actually about the color. Like I said, color is something which comes naturally. So apart from the
Right.
classification which I spoke about is basically based on the process. So there are 6. So these are the only 6 type of classification when it comes to actually the Camellia sinensis family. And the 7th classification is of the tisanes, or the teas which do not contain any Camellia sinensis, basically the caffeine-free teas or the herbal teas. But yes, when it comes to the manufacturing process, these are the only 6 types.
All right. I believe
Yes.
that answers the question, Shilpa. Going ahead with Gunjan's question, are flushes applicable to all kinds of tea or only black tea?
Flushes are applicable to all kind of tea. You can have a flush in a green tea also, but yes, they are more popular in black teas. But yes, there could be flushes in white teas also. There could be flushes in green teas also, especially depending on what type of tea you are buying and from which place you are buying. There could be flush in other types of teas also.
Right. Another question by Tanmay. He's asking, like, we discussed about the comparison between a CTC and a whole leaf tea. So
Right.
if we had to facilitate a change between a CTC preference to a whole leaf preference, how do we convince the guest, or how do we convince anyone who's buying the
Right.
tea?
So it's actually good to understand the requirement of the guest. For example, the guest just wants to go with a tea with milk and sugar, or probably wants to go with a masala chai or something. It's always good to recommend or go with the CTC chai. But yes, if a guest is somebody who wants his tea to be brewed and probably want milk and sugar things to be served on the side, or say to be served separately, then I think it's a better idea to serve him or recommend him a orthodox tea, because orthodox teas are supposed to be drunk without milk ideally, because of the flavors and characters. And most people who will ask for tea separate, I mean milk separate, I'm sure will obviously like to first taste the brew neat, which basically without milk. So it's always depends on first to check with the customer. I think it's good to what kind of tea would prefer, just a ready-made masala chai, or probably even if he says a black tea, you can always check. Are you looking for, sir, a very strong cup of black tea? Probably I can use the CTC leaves to make a black tea for you. Or if you're looking for a good cup of black tea with nice flavors, say aroma profile, then obviously you can recommend for orthodox. So it also depends how educated the guest is or how aware the guest is about teas. Somebody who's a tea connoisseur, I'm sure, will go for a orthodox or the whole leaf, compared to somebody who's been drinking only the masala chais or say the ready-made chai.
Right. Going ahead with Tejas's question, Tejas mentioned that there are a lot of tea variants which have the flavors of strawberry green, and like we saw in the earlier TWG packages also,
Right.
there was Moroccan mint and chocolate. So how exactly is the flavor blending done with the tea?
So it's basically the natural extracts which are blended with the tea, and this process is basically, you can say, the last stage just before the packaging happens. So most of the time, the natural flavors, the natural oils which are extracted could be from flowers, could be from fruits. In fact, sometimes the flower itself could be blended with the tea leaf. For example, like jasmine, if you see, they put the dried jasmine flowers, they blend it along with the tea leaves itself. So that is something which is the stage, you can say, after all the processes are done, the final stage just before packaging, they will blend these. Could be the flower itself, or could be, or sometimes could be spices also, like we do with masala chai and all. These spices just added straight away to the black teas, and they are mixed, they are blended. So
Right.
yes, the flavors is blending is quite easy. However, when it comes to blending two different types of teas, it is more like a blending a blended whiskey, a Scotch whiskey, wherein the tea taster will come into picture. He will taste teas from different tea estates, and then they will decide which tea in which quantity should be blended along with which particular tea in which quantity. So that is basically kind of more expertise required, or more experience required, because these tea blending units will have these tea tasters tasting teas coming in from different tea estates, tea gardens, and that is how they decide the blends.
Right. I hope it answers the question, Tejas. Moving on to Shivani's question, she's asking the longest time period for tea, for maturing teas. What is the longest time period that you can mature a tea?
There is no such longest time period. Like for example, obviously in whiskeys you have 21 years. So in teas usually will not find. But yes, matured teas, like I said, could be matured for minimum of at least 2 months. So could be the maturation period could be even up to for certain teas could be up to 7 to 8 years. So I have come across certain mature teas which have even been aged to about 7 to 8 years. Nothing longer than that. But yes, there is no such time limitation to it. Even if somebody wants to mature it, say further, even further, say after 7 to 8 years, that can be done. But then, as per you can say the mature tea industry, there is no such law or a rule that the mature tea can be matured only maximum up to a certain period, or say to a minimum period.
Right. I hope it answered the question also. Moving on to Varun's question, which is related to the maturation. So he's asking if the tea loses flavor over time, as in, is there any shelf life when they go for maturation or when they buy it? So is there any shelf life for tea?
Yes. Most teas will have shelf life. Like for example, in our teas in TWG, we have a shelf life of our loose teas as well as our tea bags is 3 years, but it can range somewhere between 1 year to 3 years. So when you buy your teas, no matter which tea you're buying, you should always look on the packaging for the shelf life or the expiry period. If it is not there, it's always good to, if you're, like, for example, sourcing it directly from a tea estate or a garden, it's always better to also check with the estate or the wholesaler from wherever you're buying what is going to be the tea shelf life of this particular tea. And also it is important, the storage is very important. I mean, if you store it properly, say in a airtight container, in a cool, dark place, your tea is going to last better and for a longer time, because moisture and air, or say oxygen, are the two main enemies of tea. I mean, if you store it properly in a place where it's not going to come in contact with heat and say air or water, the tea is going to go really, really well for even for a very long time. But yes, shelf life should be checked before you buy it. That is something very important.
All right. Moving on to Khushi's question, she's asking a bit more insight on the Earl Grey tea blend. You could give more insight on that blend.
So Earl Grey is So Earl Grey is basically again is a black tea. So usually now, in fact, nowadays a lot of companies are also experimenting with green Earl Greys. You might also come across green tea. So Earl Grey is basically a tea which is supposed to be blended by tradition with oils from bergamot oranges. So it's basically a citrus flavored teas, which they use a particular type of orange called the bergamot orange, and the oils extracted from the skin or the peels of this oranges are used to blend with black teas. And black teas usually include again Assam and sometimes the Kenyan black tea. So these two black teas could be blended, and then again they blend it before packaging with the extracts or the oils of the bergamot orange, which is basically a citrus kind of tea. Citrus. Right. Hence, it is also advisable that whenever you make a Earl Grey tea, you should never add milk to it because it has got some orange oils in it.
Moving on to Malvika's question, she's asking if there's any component of fluoride in tea that is considered to be poisonous. Is there any of this sort?
Fluoride. Tea naturally contains fluoride. It's not poison. In fact, fluoride is good for health because there are very few food items which contain natural source of fluoride. Fluoride is something which is good for our bones and also good for our teeth enamel, which helps our bone and tooth to remain healthy. So see, if you are consuming a regular amount of tea, which is somewhere between 5 to 6 cups in a day, which is usually recommended amount of tea for any type, it could be black tea, green tea, I don't think it's going to be poisonous anyhow, unless you accept. But fluoride is something which is good, in fact, and which is naturally found in tea leaves, and which helps our bone and teeth, like I said, to remain healthy.
All right. Moving on to the question. So Khushi again, she's asking, like in today's market, we've seen a growth in jobs for wine tasting and being sommeliers and all of that. So right. What does the market look like today for tea tasting and study of teas?
Market is really good. In fact, I'm happy that she asked this question because there are a lot of opportunities for students like you in tea industry also. Because like I said, obviously, tea market is much more bigger in India compared to the wine market. So obviously there are a lot of tea companies, there are a lot of tea estates. So, and if you talk about job opportunities, and in fact, there are a lot of now courses also available, like there are tea sommelier courses. If you are someone who likes to drink teas or probably enjoy teas, you can always go for a proper course. And there are online courses available. There are full-time courses also available with certain institutes. And once you pursue that, you can always start working with a tea estate. In fact, tea tourism is something which is also growing in India. A lot of tea estates in Darjeeling and Assam, even in Himachal, I have seen they have proper tourist facilities, just like your wine tourism is there. They invite you, you stay there at the vineyard and you explore how wine is made. Same way in tea also. So tea tasters, tea tourism guides are something which are in demand. Tea sommeliers, again, or even if you want to go to the manufacturing side, obviously probably you'll have to study more towards the technical side, and you can also become a tea maker or a tea blender. So yes, there are a lot of job opportunities in the tea industry.
Amazing. Moving on.
Yes.
We had a question regarding fermented tea. I believe that person was referring to kombucha. I'm not sure, but he's asking
Yes.
about the popularity and fermented tea, how it is in today's market.
Kombucha is getting pop. So fermented now, like say, fermentation is a process. Like I said, mature teas and yellow teas also go undergo fermentation during the manufacturing process. But when you talk about kombucha, that's a different fermentation altogether. That is wherein you brew the tea, you add some sugar, and then you allow it to purposely you allow it to ferment with the help of by adding some sugar. And kombucha is something which is nowadays very getting popular, especially in the bar industry. A lot of bartenders are seen using them in cocktails and mocktails because it has a very low alcoholic content, somewhere between 0.5 to 1% alcohol. So, and it's also a healthy option. A lot of people, they just drink kombucha, they make kombucha at home and then they drink it for health reasons because it's a fermented beverage with a very low alcoholic content, but plus it also has some health benefits of teas. So yes, kombucha is something which can be made at home by when you add some honey to it or probably some sugar to your brewed tea and just allow it to ferment for 2 to 3 days. You can make a nice kombucha. So kombucha, yes, are something which are the new trends, especially in the bar
He
industry.
specified something in his question. He says that he's not talking about kombucha. He's talking about post fermented tea.
Post fermented tea. No, I didn't get that. What is post fermented tea? Because kombucha is something which is basically you get after you ferment the tea.
Right, exactly, which is what I thought, but he's
Hmm.
referring to something called post fermented tea.
No, then I wouldn't know this because I am not. In fact, I could not understand his question. What is post-fermented tea? Because after fermentation, what you get is kombucha, or else if he's referring to a mature tea or a yellow tea, I'm not sure.
All right.
What is for? I didn't
Actually,
get.
I'm referring to post-fermented teas where the wild leaves from the tea family, they are plucked and they are not dried. They're actually uh, kept in a casket kind of thing, shaped into a round discs, and they are put into different shells for fermentation over a period of time, mostly for a couple of years.
So it seems like I guess the mature teas, the puer teas that you're talking about, the pure teas also go under the same process. So now puer teas, like I mentioned, they can be both in the cake form and can be in the loose tea form. So it depends. It all depends on what shape you're rolling them. Like you said, can be rolled into small balls also. So it's this the post fermentation process is the same. It's the same thing I think you are referring to, which in they steam the leaf slightly and then they put them into certain containers or probably could be in bamboo baskets and they allow the leaf to ferment for certain months or certain years. So yes, that can be could be a puer or a maturity also. It can be categorized under.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Moving ahead, Chef Ayer is with us today. I'm very glad. So he's asking about if Nilgiri, what is the essential difference between Nilgiri tea or Munnar tea and Assam tea?
So Nilgiris, if you see, they come from south of India. The main difference, as I mentioned, is basically the climatic conditions. So Nilgiris are supposed to be much more light-bodied compared to Assam, and also can say they're not that strongly flavorful. So very delicate kind of taste profile, little bit more on a spicier side kind of taste profile. They have a much lighter brew. Bodies also Nilgiris will usually have a medium bodied. Whereas talk about Assam because of the climatic conditions and the kind of soil which Assam has because of the river Brahmaputra, it gets a lot of nutrients the soil gets. So the teas which the Assam produces, especially the black teas, are much more stronger in terms of character, flavor, full-bodied teas with a lot of malty, nutty taste to it compared to Nilgiri, which is much more slightly on a lighter side, the lighter brew and also little slightly on a spicy notes. Nilgiris are usually made also blended well with Assam. In fact, a lot of I have seen that Nilgiri and Assam blends goes very well because Nilgiri adds a slight body to Assam and also adds little spicy notes to Assam tea. So Assam is more about the strong characters, the malty taste and slight bitterness, whereas Nilgiri adds a slight of spicy and slightly sweet notes to Assam. So yes, they are coming from obviously both from India, but two different parts. So they are very different from each other in terms of flavor profile. So it's all again because of the terroir, like which I mentioned, the climatic conditions and the place where they grow.
Amazing. I hope that answers the question, Chef. Yes. So moving on to the final two questions. So we have a question regarding points to be considered while making cocktails with tea. When you add tea to any champagne or any of that sort,
Right.
what do we consider?
So see, one thing is you first decide what kind of tea you're going to use, because certain teas will go well with certain alcohol, right? So you can decide. First thing is the kind of brew that you're making or infusing your tea. For example, like say green teas go really well with gin. I'm just saying this through my experience. I mean, because I keep you making cocktails also with teas. Or for example, the black teas go really well with whiskeys, especially smoky whiskeys, your peated whiskeys. The black teas go, even with rum, the black teas go well with. So this is something which you always need to consider, what kind of tea you are going to use, and what, in fact, the red teas, the chamomile teas, they go well with the white spirits like vodka. Again, gin can be blended with these teas. So yes, that also matters. And how long you brew your teas also matters, and how you are brewing. For example, certain bartenders I've seen, they make cold brews. So cold brews is basically wherein they just put the tea bags, the tea leaves in cold water or the room temperature water, and then keep it in the fridge and allow it to brew overnight. Whereas sometimes you also make a quick hot brew, put your leaves in the hot water. So these things, yes, the temperature, the timing, and the kind of leaves that you're using to brew your tea for a particular spirit will also matter a lot when it comes to cocktails.
All right. I hope that answers it. So coming to the next question, Varun Mistry was asking about the Kashmiri Noor chai that is pink in color, and the Kashmiris add baking soda to it. So why that specific ingredient is being added to that?
So that's because that's basically you can say a reaction which happens because baking soda, when you add to, I think they also add a little salt to, so the tea leaves, so automatically the baking soda, when it mixes with milk, salt, and with the tea leaves, or with the tea brew, it gives that pinkish color, which is a natural reaction which happens because of adding baking soda. So the pink color, or that Nuran, what is called gulabi chai, I think they call it. So that is actually because of the baking soda, because unless you add baking soda, that pink, you won't get that pink color, because pink color is not added artificially to the tea. It's naturally comes in when the chlorophyll in the green tea reacts with the baking soda. That's what happens.
All right. So we have one final question from
Mhm.
from Agaz Khan.
Yes.
He mentioned infusion. Okay, what classification of tea is preferred for infusion? Infusion in the sense of adding various, like when we blend teas, like you said. So
Mhm.
what exact classification do they use? Like what is
I think she
more
wants to
likely
ask
to be?
what grade they use, I guess. So now blending.
I Mhm. Please go ahead, sir.
So classification, why, I guess, if I'm not getting her question wrong, I think she wants to ask grade wise. So again, blending depends on. So for example, if you're blending a CTCT, then obviously all the grades will have to be CT. For example, you have a CTC from probably Assam, a CTC from Nilgiri, then you can blend those CTC. You cannot blend a CTC with a whole leaf, right? Same way, if you're blending two whole leaf teas, again, it has to be a whole leaf or orthodox from different parts of the, say, India, or could be from different part of the world. But yes, the grade has to be same for blending, because if you blend a CTC with a whole leaf, obviously, and when you brew it, the brew is not going to come good, because the orthodox leaf will have a different flavor profile. The CTC is going to have a different flavor profile. So yes, the grade matters when you are blending. So make sure that if you're blending it, it has to be of the same grade. Say two different orthodox can be blended, two different CTCs can be blended, but you cannot blend a CTC with an orthodox. So that is something which is important. The grade of the leaf is important when blending.
All right. One final question from Khushi. It's a clarification that she's asking
Mhm.
regarding that. Just to confirm, red tea artisans, they don't
Correct.
contain Camellia sinensis leaves. He's confirming the fact.
True. Yes, most of the red teas will be tisanes. They fall in the tisane category. They will not contain any camellia, because, as far as I know, I've never seen any red tea. I mean, the rooibos being blended with, say, black, proper Camellia sinensis leaves, because it has its own flavor, character, and a nice red color to it. But yes, like I said, even if you are buying any other tisane, make sure that you always go through the label, go through the packaging, and read the label and see what are the ingredients. Because sometimes now, like, because there are no fixed classification or rule as such for the tisanes and herbal teas, at least in Indian market. So sometimes certain tea companies might also call a Camellia sinensis tea blended with, probably just they write on the packaging tisanes, which is actually should not be there, but still it's always good to read. But yes, rooibos, like you said, red tea will always be Camellia sinensis, will be free from Camellia sinensis, no caffeine, and it will be sold by itself.
All right. All right. I believe we have answered all questions. If any
Great.
more questions are to appear, please mention them in the chat box. I'll be moving ahead. So as we have come to an end of this session, I would like to thank, first of all, Mr. Divyanshu for organizing this webinar, and we sure have a very new perspective to look at things
Right. Thank
when
you.
it comes
Thank
to
you.
tea, because we have tea every day, but we don't look at it in that importance. It's just a
True.
daily need of us. So I would also like to thank Mr. A.K. Singh, Principal of IHM Mumbai, and Mr. Kate, HOD Food and Beverage, for facilitating this webinar, and also the participants who have stayed throughout and gave a good response for this webinar. I hope everyone's doing well. Stay safe and please take care of your good health.
Thank you. So what I'm doing is, Manas, this last thing, I'm sharing my email ID in case if
Yes.
anyone has any further questions, or if, in case we have mixed any questions, you can also send it to me on my email ID. In fact, I've also shared our website address, which is the wellnessstore.in. It's a very interesting site. Like I said in the beginning, you can always go and refer that site. There's a FAQ section which will give you a nice information on, in fact, might also answer a lot of your questions on teas, because I've got a lot of basic knowledge on teas. So you can visit, and probably you can also follow us on our Insta and FB handles, because we keep sharing a lot of interesting tea related stories, tea trivias, and some recipes, mocktail recipes with teas on a Instagram handle. So I've shared all these things. And in fact, what I'll also do is I have a small handout copy which I will mail Manas, and Manas, you can then share it with all the
For
students.
sure, by all means.
That
By all
handout
means.
will actually cover everything which I cover. I mean, have on the slide which I had today on the PowerPoint presentation, so that everything is there in that hard handout copy in a PDF format. So I will mail it that to you.
Right, sir.
All right, sir.
Thank you so much for today's session. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Manas. In fact, you are the one who have been coordinating with me, and thanks a lot again to Kate sir and Mr. A.K. Singh sir for giving this an opportunity for me again, especially during these times, difficult times where we can meet online and we can interact with all the students. So thank you once again to all the faculties, to Manas, to A.K. Singh sir, and also to all our participants, because for taking out time and joining us for this session. So great, guys. So I hope you all stay healthy, stay safe, and drink a lot of tea, obviously, to stay even in these difficult situations. And I wish you all the best for your careers in future. Thank you once again. Thank you.
By all means. IHM Mumbai students, join us at 6 o'clock at Instagram with Taranjit Singh for our open mic at volume 6. Okay. Bye bye, guys. See you.
Bye bye. See you.